Hey there, welcome to A Year of Trek. My name is Mish, and I'm a Trekkie. I'm so much of a Trekkie, I have created this crazy idea of watching a full year of Star Trek, but it's easy because I broke it down to 15 episodes a week, which means 2 episodes a day, except on Saturdays, which is 3 episodes. And this crazy idea I had that was like, God, this is gonna be so awesome. Wow, it's a bigger endeavor than I thought. But you know what? It is super fun because we get to rewatch these gems that we have that have been on the air for years and kind of reanalyze them. I've noticed things new that I've never noticed before. So it's just really fun. Plus, I just love talking about Star Trek. Like, who doesn't? Even the stupid stuff. I love talking about Star Trek. Okay, so today, the 2 episodes that we got to watch is Operation Annihilate, which is the final, it's the season finale of season 1. So we got through all of season 1. It's crazy. 2 episodes a day. Just knock this stuff out. And then we get the season premiere of season 2. So with Amok time. So let's get in. And yes, Rob, it is amazing and crazy that we're still on track. The only thing is now I will be on tomorrow. So for you new watchers out there, Thursdays are our big days because we have a new episode of New Trek, and that's going to be a completely different podcast. That's at 5:30, and then at 7 is our standard whatever we watch for the day. So tomorrow's a big day, Lower Decks, and then the next 2 episodes in our list. Get the list right here. Or you can go on to ayeartrek.com and see the sheet there. So let's get into today's episode. We got Operation Annihilate. It is stardate 3287.2. They are en route to you know what? I should have written down the planet's name, but I think it's Deneb 4, maybe Deneb something like. Anyway, so as a side plot of getting into this suspension of this planet is not responding to communications, Spock is like, oh yeah, just by the way, been tracking this interesting information that this star system, they went crazy and the culture died like 200 years ago. And then this culture, like the neighboring star system, well, everyone went crazy and that culture died and so on and so forth. And then of course, the Deneb system is like right next door to them. So it definitely starts with a D. Now, it just so happens, dun, 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 his brother, Sam, George Samuel Kirk, he goes by Sam, and his wife and his kids live on this planet. Now, all we just hear is, oh, well, he's a research biologist. I couldn't get his wife's name. Kirk says it like 3 times or 4 times, and he says it a different way every time. And I did an internet search to try and find the correct spelling, and I failed. I could not. I got onto Memory Alpha, Memory Beta, some random other Star Trek things. I got Wikipedia, the history of James Kirk, all that kind of stuff. It only ever mentions the brother, does not mention the wife. And actually, if it mentions the wife, it just mentions her as a wife. Probably because everybody who was watching was like, I don't know her name. I don't know. And actually, here, bear with me for a second. James Blish. If you haven't read these are Star Trek readers. Let's see. What are we doing? Operation Annihilate. We're going to do this, and maybe I'll do this later. But basically, James Blish wrote like Star Trek stories. Shoot. Aurelian? See, that's what I thought. I thought it started with an A. Okay, I'll do that search later. Where did you find that? Because I thought it started with an A, and then it sounded like it started with an M. Like I have Marleyan. So I don't know. Anyway, I know I kind of squirreled there because it would take way too much time to see what her name is in James Blish's thing. So anyway, I did notice it is not on Wikipedia. I looked on Wikipedia. Oh, well. I was also very distracted today. Lots of stuff going on in the real world. Okay, well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. So, so his brother Sam, the wife, and at least one of his kids. Now, here's the thing: is that Kirk's nephew, Sam's son, Peter, we only meet him in the episode. But according to a previous episode, What Little Girls Are Made Of, it's mentioned that Sam has 3 sons. So where's the other 2? Is Peter the youngest? Because Sam, I think, is the oldest son. There's Sam and then there's Jim, but I don't know. Anyway, in this episode, it's just Sam's dead, the wife ends up dying, and Peter ends up living. Now, what happened to Peter? That would be a good storyline. What did he go into biology like his dad, or the sciences? Did he go into is he at the family farm on Earth? I don't know. What happened to Peter? Like, did he end up going into Starfleet, or is he some bartender? Shoot, I don't know. I did notice that on the bridge, Uhura is wearing a black belt along with her red uniform. I don't think I'd ever noticed the black belt before, but when they beam down to the planet, you've got one of the yeomen. She is also wearing a black belt, but her communicator for the away mission is attached to the black belt. So it's almost like that is, okay, hold on. I'm getting a photo. And so, okay. All right, cool. Oh, he looked up the actual episode. I was looking, I didn't do a very good lookup. Okay. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Okay. So moving on, they find out what's happening. You've got, it's this cellular creature that makes people crazy. And they find out that something with the sun gets to do it, because at the beginning, one of the I almost said Denelbium. one of the ships from that one of that ship's what do you call it, from the planet was going into their sun, and he's like, finally I'm free. So it all has to do with these single cellular flying pancakes that just happened to infect Spock. Okay, now Spock gets infected. They get him to the bridge, or they get him back up to the ship. They find out that there's a lot of pain going on with this, and it makes people crazy. Blah blah blah. And now Spock does his little Spock thing and gets out of sickbay. The flying jellyfish. Okay, there's another way to look at it. I always thought they just looked like really weird pancakes to me. But it took like 4 or 5 guys to take Spock down on the bridge before they could sedate him. I totally had flashbacks from fighting with patients on the mental health ward at the hospital, because you get those really big guys and you got one person on each limb, and sometimes you got to actually tackle them to the floor while the nurses come over and give IMs. So that was a great reinventing hospital experience for me. We learn that there's 14 science labs on the Enterprise, and because of that fact, they need to figure out what's going on. I already mentioned the 2 suns. Okay, so they finally figure out that something with bright light kills this organism. Okay, they use their deductive reasoning. The whole dude in the shuttlecraft going towards the what do you call it, the sun earlier on. And so they were like, okay, well, and Kurt and Spock is like, okay, well, I'll be the guinea pig because I've got this thing in me. So they shoot him with all this light, and even McCoy was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I only needed to do ultraviolet light. And Spock's like, hey, no, I'm good. And then he walks into a table and he goes, but I'm blind. I mean, I thought that was kind of comedic. It's like, no, he's like, I'm good. I'm ready to go. And then, but I'm blind. All right. Per Wikipedia, the neural parasites were created by prop designer Hua Cheng from bags of fake vomit. They are now flying vomit pancakes. That's yes, we'll have to use that term from now on. Flying vomit pancakes. So the whole thing is they can't just kill everybody on the planet because, well, that would be killing a lot of innocent people. But Kirk and crew have to stop these creatures from these infected humans from building ships and then going to the next system to pass it on. So they have to find a way. So they found a way through ultraviolet light, and really the only way to do it is to put a bunch of satellites in the sky, in orbit, and then just inundate with such bright ultraviolet light that it's going to kill all the flying vomit pancakes. Now with the new CGI, it actually shows the Enterprise dropping these satellites. And Sulu says, he says, all 210 satellites are in place, blah, blah, blah. Where did they get 210 satellites? And there's a satellite control on the ship. Like, where do they store all this stuff? I mean, now you could probably explain it away with, okay, well, it's just, it's like the replicators, because they have a primitive form of replicators on the Enterprise. So maybe they did it that way, but I don't know. That's a lot of satellites. Now, of course, at the end, Spock shows up at the, they've saved the day. Spock ends up being back on the bridge, and he can see again. And boom! It's because he has an inner eyelid. So, okay, interesting thing. Now, we all knew that. I mean, because we've seen the episode 100 times. All right, so Rob is saying in the satellite storage bay next to the 14 med bays. Okay, I'll buy that. So lots of different things established. I'd like to know where Sam's other boys are. I don't know. I'm going to explain it away that they're older, that Peter was the youngest, and the others are either in university or Starfleet. All right. So not a bad episode. Like, we learn a lot, and it's like it's that great episodic adventure. The story was actually not too bad. There wasn't those lines where you're just like, oh my gosh. There was, and even the fight scene between Spock and the dude on the planet when he goes to go get a pancake, and even Spock on the bridge when he's being tackled by the four guys. I mean, it didn't look like they used any stuntmen, and if they did, you really couldn't tell. It actually wasn't too bad. So, all right, on to Amok time. The Ponfar. All right, so we're at stardate 3372.7. And one of the first things that we notice in the episode is that we have DeForest Kelley's name in the beginning titles. Or in the beginning credits, which is very, very cool because he didn't do that. He was not there in the past. So he's getting a bigger check because he's a named person. So of course, Spock he's not acting right. He's threatened McCoy with breaking his neck, but that's really hearsay because we don't actually hear Spock say it. And so finally, when Spock is like, when Spock, he gets a bowl of soup from Nurse Chapel, and of course he throws it out the door, and he's like, "Take me to Vulcan." So Kirk is like, "Okay, fine. We'll do this. We've got this one mission, but we'll do it. We'll deviate." And he says, "I can't remember what Spock says or what Kirk says, but Spock's response is, and I think he's holding a stylus to the pads that they use, but he's like, no, we are not. I think he's talking about like if he's okay or not." And I'm like, what? Here's my notes. What on earth was he going to do with that pokey thing? Now, I just wrote pokey thing. It's probably a stylus, but he's like, no, we are not. And yes, Rob was a little bit ahead of it, but yes, we get to see Chekhov. Chekhov is in Star Trek officially. This is his first episode, and I'll read you my notes. He kind of looks like Davy Jones from the Monkees. Oh, wait. That's the whole point, was to get somebody that looked like Davy Jones from the Monkees. Because of the popularity, they wanted to get a younger person that had a really straight, bad hair. And that was a wig. He wore a wig. What was it? Oh, because they don't really know about the whole Ponfar thing, Kirk is like, you know what? You need to go. He tells Spock, you need to go. You're kind of being an idiot or an ass. You need to go to sick bay. And so he goes into sick bay and he tells McCoy, I've come to sick bay as ordered. Now I'm going to go back to my room. And McCoy is like, dude, let me just give you a once over just to see how things are going. And I wrote this down because this is another line I like, where McCoy just looks at him and he goes, look, just yield to the logic of the situation. I was like, I kind of like that line. I like that one. And then, of course, then we have another scene where Spock is back. He's looking. Now, I know I have some dark humor, but Spock is he's looking at a picture of this Vulcan kid, because we haven't really met the wife yet. But my first note is Spock looking at kiddie porn? Now I know, bad thought, but that was just the first thing I wrote down. Let's see. And then of course there is that big conversation between Kirk and Spock, and we learn about the Ponfar and the 7 years. And then Spock is like, well, have you ever wondered how Vulcans choose their mates? And Kirk just kind of looks at him. He goes, well, I really would have thought it would be done logically. Every time I hear that line, it just makes me chuckle, even though I've heard it a billion times. Now, of course, they get to Vulcan eventually. Even there's this back and forth because plot complication. They have to get to their destination quicker by command of Starfleet, and Kirk is just like, you know what, I'm going to do this for my friend, and so screw Starfleet. We're gonna take care of Spock. So we meet T'Pring for the first time, and of course Spock is like, and they're like, oh, who is that? And Nurse Chapel comes up. She's on the bridge, and he goes, oh, that is T'Pring, my wife. And the look on Chapel's face is like, what? Like, it's like, it was, I had to chuckle at that. That reaction I thought was pretty funny. This is the first episode where they do the Vulcan Salute. And later on, they actually say those famous lines, live long and prosper. Leonard Nimoy talks about how this is something that he developed and it was actually out of something that he saw at synagogue that he wasn't supposed to see. But he saw, what do you call it? The rabbi with their hands like this, blessing stuff. And so he recalled that, and he was like, hey, why don't we do that? Okay. Yes. Good point. The whole rubber band effect with their travels was the only comedic element in the story. Now, when you look at that relationship between Sulu and Sulu and Chekhov, there is that little comic relief. They've got that little chat. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. It's Tim Roth and why can't I remember his name? Gary Oldman. They play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Anyway, so those characters are from Hamlet. They end up dying at the end of Hamlet, but the movie is basically their story. But it's like the entire movie is this, because they're just goofy characters, and it's what we would see off stage. And of course, then there's the famous, on stage scenes, but it's really their story off stage. And I've only seen it like maybe twice, but it's such a good movie. But they've just got this goofy relationship. And when I that those interactions between Chekhov and Sulu, I automatically was like, oh, they're Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So, let's see what other stuff. Okay, so bad. I saw this as a bad edit. So it's come to the point they're on the plane. They're on Vulcan. Spock is about to go over and bang the gong or do whatever he needs to do for the ceremony, and you see him walking towards the gong thingy, and then you see the two guys with the bells walk beside him, and then you see T'Pring start going this way, and then it cuts because T'Pring was standing next to T'Pol. So let's see. So she starts walking, and then it cuts, and she's standing next to and I know T'Pol is not T'Pol from Enterprise, but the older chick. She's then standing there again, and then it takes a cut out, and then she starts walking from that position. So I'm just like, I think that was a bad edit. And I don't know if they had any really good footage to fix that, but obviously they didn't. So they didn't fix it, or nobody really caught it. And honestly, I didn't see that until today, because of course this whole thing is me paying more attention to POW. Thank you. It still had a T and an apostrophe P and an A. It was just the U and the L that I was, for some reason, messing up in my brains. Let's see. So there's that. And then there's the constant ching 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 ching. Like it seemed like it was going on forever. Whether it was him going up to the bong, to whether it was Kirk trying to make this decision. Does he actually fight? Because T'Pring has said, no, I don't want to marry you. I want a challenge, and I'm going to have you fight Kirk because she's an evil bitch. Oh, you had to turn on the subtitles. That good assumption, because she would be about that old. I honestly think she would. Let's see. And even on a side note, when they talk about Strange New Worlds, there's talk about bringing Archer in on something or whatever. But T'Pol is another character because she would be that old. So anyway, she would be old enough to be able to do that. All right, so moving forward, let's see. Okay. So Kirk and Spock battle. They use the Vulcan weapons and hand to hand. It was kind of obvious that some of the stunt doubles did not match the characters, but it wasn't overly bad. Like, it wasn't that bad. However, I know that the writing would be like, okay, so Kurt or Spock has so much adrenaline going through him, and he's just so much stronger that when he hits the little gong thingy, it's going to break. And that when he hits the blade of the weapon, it's going to break. So let's see. Metal doesn't really react that way to those kind of strikes. Their special effects only made me think that the metal was super brittle. That's the only thing. But I guess I don't know. I mean, it was the 60s. What can you say? Let's see. Now, I said it earlier. I'm going to say it again. I wrote, here's my, T'Pring is a selfish bitch. And even though Spock says, well, that's logical, because she's like, okay, well, I had you fight Kirk. because if Kirk won, he wouldn't want me. Therefore, I have this other dude. And if let's see, and if you won, you wouldn't want me, and so I would have this other dude. But if you won, then and wanted me, you would still leave, and I'd have all of your property, and I would still have this other dude. So it's like, now he says it's logical. That's all based on lust and emotion. That's an emotional thought process there. Even though Spock is like, oh, that's actually kind of logical. That's a good thought process. Whatever. Yeah, exactly. Now, I do like Spock's line to this dude. And I can't remember his name. He says, and I'm paraphrasing because his line was a lot longer than this, but in paraphrasing, he says, you will find that having is not as great as wanting. And I was just like, how true. Like these two have been lusting together, and I'm done with it. You can have the bitch, but just remember, she's psycho. You know, you wanted her, now you got her. And getting her is not that great. So, and then of course, Spock beams back up. Kirk, of course, he's dead. But McCoy beats him up to the Enterprise. Spock finally comes up there, and lo and behold, it was just a neural stimulator or whatever he used, and it simulated death, and we get to see Spock smile. And it's this scene that a lot of people attribute that yes, okay, going back to, yes, be careful what you wish for, you may just get it. But we see Spock smile, and he's happy. He's like, Jim. And people attribute that scene to this unsaid homosexual relationship between him and and Kirk. And you're only reading it because you want to read it that way. Two dudes can totally have a loved relationship, you know, that you're so happy to see them. It just overcomes you with emotion. And if you have none, or you're trying to control your emotion, you'll fucking smile. So yes, it's that, it's that great moment. And even earlier on in the episode, where, you know, we've built up 29 episodes, because this technically is episode 30. We've gone through 29 episodes of this relationship there that Spock and McCoy and Kirk are building. And you've got this scene where in the turbo lift, where Spock is like, well, I have the right to bring friends, and Kirk, I really want you to be there. And he's like, I would be totally honored. And he's like, and you know what, McCoy, I want you there too. And so it really is like, it's just really, it really shows that the writers are really creating that bond for those three characters. And in real life, they were actually all very close, up until the end, but that's a whole different story. Oh yeah, in his reaction, especially if you thought that you killed them and they aren't dead, but behind you. He's just like, oh, and also, okay, so that, let's bringing something else up, because Spock is like, okay, I killed my captain. I'm, I should be court-martialed. So I'm not going to be in charge anymore. And he's going to hand it over to Scotty. So this isn't the first, like when Kirk leaves the bridge, sometimes he's just like, okay, Sulu, you have the con, or Chekhov, you have the con. That'll come later. But he's always, or even Mr. Leslie, security officer at the helm, gets the con. But in several episodes, they kind of established that Scotty, even though he's the engineer, he actually, I think, would be the third in charge. So you have Kirk, Spock, and Scotty. So I don't know what is canon in that because I can't remember Scott's actual rank. I think he might be a lieutenant commander, but I'm not positive. So yeah, and that's the episode. And I think they also kind of cleared up that it's like, oh well, you're back, and he's like, yeah, well, once I killed Kirk and I really didn't want her anymore, I'm good. The burning went away. So there you go. Okay. That is that. What do we have for tomorrow? Let's I'm actually using this book to mark off. See, I'm keeping track. I'm marking those off. So we have Who Mourns for Adonis, The Green Hand, and The Changeling. Okay. So 2 more pretty good episodes. And The Changeling, that's with a Nomad. That's with Nomad, isn't it? I think that's with Nomad. And then of course we get a lot of Chekhov in Who Mourns for Adonis. All right. Oh, and the new episode of Lower Decks. So Lower Decks at 5:30, regular Year Trek at 7 tomorrow, the 23rd. And until then, live long and prosper.